Hi everyone, welcome. Thank you all for coming. My name is Ashley. I'm the co-founder of Inner Space Integration, along with Sherree back here. You want to come up? The video is fine now. Yeah, thanks. So yeah, we're really thrilled to have you guys here. Inner Space Integration, we started back in May of last year to provide support to the community to integrate from psychedelic experiences. Do you want to talk about some of the things that we've done so far?
Sure. Welcome everyone, thanks for coming. The main thing that we've done so far is have our bi-monthly psychedelic integration circles. The community is growing so beautifully. We have some guests here tonight that have been to our events, and we just love having you come back over and over again to learn more and to meet other community members, and love to see this community flourish. We also provide private integration services, and we do integration intensives for those who want to go deeper into the work of understanding past psychedelic experiences. So if anyone is interested in that, you can just come and talk to us. And other events in our community is Ashley is the founder of Aware Project, which I'm sure that she will talk about in just a minute. And I also, with my private practice as a psychedelic integration coach, host workshops, specifically shamanic practices, which the next one that's coming up will be on April 13th with the amazing Cell Circuit, who's sitting in the audience today, an incredible healer that works with various types of plant medicines and specifically CBD oils. So he's an expert, so he'll be talking about treatment protocols for CBD oil. And yeah, that is it in a nutshell. We're super excited to have Dario here, another dear member of the community, one of the best men we have. And this has been a long time coming, and Dario has been so gracious when he offered to do this workshop for us as a gift to our community. So we're so thankful to have you here.
Cool. Thank you.
Great, and I'll just, so we have a couple of these flyers if you are not aware of our other events. So Inner Space Integration and my other project, the Aware Project, are sister organizations. So the Aware Project is a community building and educational event series. We have monthly events on the west side, downtown, and in San Diego, bringing in speakers to talk about various aspects of psychedelia, from shamans to scientists. So we would love to see you at our next event. We're going to be having it, and Ben was the last speaker earlier this week, which was really excellent. He was talking about the pharmacology of ayahuasca, and we'll have that video up on YouTube in a couple weeks. And then our next event coming up is April 11th, and it will be downtown, and it will be two women from the Drug Policy Alliance talking about criminal justice and socio-political issues surrounding the prohibition on psychedelics. So I'm really excited that we got them to come and talk. And yeah, check out our website and us on Facebook to find out more events coming up. So glad to have you guys all here, and thrilled to have Dario here. So thank you all.
Thank you. Yeah, it's very exciting for me, not only to be able to present to an audience that when I have a title like Your Brain in Altered States, that it isn't just a hypothetical state, that people here have practical experience, but to be in the presence of folks like psychologists and pharmacists and so on, that there really is a concerted effort to understand what's going on. How can we make the most of these kinds of experiences? And that's what I hope I'll give some idea for all of you tonight, is like what's going on in the brain. If you want to know more, and I know sometimes people are like, oh, I don't see anyone with a notepad tonight, but if you feel like you have to memorize everything or whatever, do know that I have like a booklet version, not exactly of this presentation, but more or less. And so you can just ask me about that at the end. So no frantic note-taking. And they're 50% off, so I figured, why not? So what are we going to talk about tonight? Well, first of all, yes, I'm going to do some talking, because I got to tell you a little bit about the brain so you understand the case studies, like what happened with them. And then I also have a little device here. And believe it or not, this whole thing is a brain imaging device, just this. And it's actually really easy to take through customs internationally and everything, because they think that they're like headphones or something like that. And I always expect that they're going to stop me because there's some weird device in here with a bunch of like sensors and electrodes and all of that. but it's not. And it really is amazing to be able to see it live, like what's going on. The nervous system. There is this stereotype in Western culture. Where is your brain? Where is consciousness? Where is consciousness? Anyone want to sort of volunteer if you had to point to a part of your body?
In the cloud.
In the cloud, right? Okay. What is it about? Most people are going to say it's up here, right? But your nervous system is all throughout your whole body. So I think it's one reason why with psychedelic experiences and even with meditation and so on, people suddenly discover like, oh my God, my nervous system goes throughout my whole body. Like I can feel my stomach now. As I was reading Carl Jung, one thing that was really interesting is that in early cultures, and probably even in some cultures today, if you ask them where was your consciousness, like the Greeks, they would say it was here. Because if it didn't make your heartbeat change, then it wasn't worthwhile to talk, it wasn't a real thing. And then there are tribal cultures, well, they'll point to here. This is where, because if it doesn't give you an upset stomach, or like the Japanese say, haragatatsu, it doesn't make your stomach stand up, then it's not a real thing. So to me, this is really exciting that even though we're going to look at brain imaging and what happens in the brain, to remember that really there's stuff going on in the whole body. And the beautiful thing is with this technology is there's a mode we can look at, alpha waves, which tell us when the brain is connecting to the rest of the body. And so when I did the case studies, and that's like 3/4 of the lecture part tonight, is just these case studies, is being able to see before, during, after. Do people's meditation practices improve? Are they able to connect with their body? Do they go into a mode that's associated with insights and learning? Do they fall asleep? You know, the number of people, you do ayahuasca, and the person's like, and they might be slightly asleep some of the time. But actually it turns out on DMT that the people are not asleep at all, even though they look like it. Okay, they're very much in the brain, not asleep. Brain waves associated with sleep completely like not active. Okay, a whole bunch of other really cool stuff is going on. I don't think I need to describe what entheogens are about, generating the divine within. So whether it's 5-MeO-DMT, Sapo, 5, you may have heard of it in different ways. Ayahuasca, substances that evoke healing, spiritual experiences, growth, insight. If we have time, and I don't think we will, but I really love this idea. Carl Jung in 1932 gave some lectures on Kundalini yoga. I think he was probably the only person in Austria who was doing Kundalini in 1932. And so what he wrote about it, and as I'm hearing about it, he's giving some lectures to people, and I'm reading the transcript, I'm like, wow, like he definitely had some experiences, even though he never said he did. You read through it and you look at his work that was published after he died, the Red Book, and you're like, yeah, he definitely had some experiences. So there really has been a nice, he really gave a lot of ideas about how we integrate the experiences that we have to create something he called a transcendent function. So I have slides for it, so if you have questions about it, it's really more like the Q&A period. I think we can cover that. But, and then of course, what have I been working with? So folks doing meditation. I was very pleased when I went to Seattle, like this time last year, there was a gal doing, she's a psychologist, clinical psychologist, who's been doing Kundalini yoga for 10 years. She could change her brain on a dime. Really very impressive. But there's lots of spaces in between where we can practice our meditation, and I'm going to talk a lot about that tonight. What are some benefits for it? 5-MeO-DMT, DMT as well. What's going on in these altered states? So it's, to me, coming from a neuroscience background, it gave a lot of meaning to me, because it's like, okay, I'm not just asleep, it's not like a dream state at all, it's not like these things that people would sort of assume it would be. That something very special is happening, that we're actually entering a mode that's like a really, really productive mode for habit changing and for having insights and doing something with this. And if you have a question tonight, like just raise your hand, or you can call me Dario. That's, my students can call me Dario, that's okay. And I just sort of feel like Oprah here. And I walk past the OWN building like every other day. That's like her, I mean, imagine you own a whole TV network. It's, so I don't know, it's a little weird to me, but it's all good. So just raise your hand and ask, what's that? These are brain basics, so we got to do some brain things just so we can make sense of what's going on. This is a side view, and by the way, I have seen a sliced brain before, in person. at the University of Auckland. What a treat to be able to see sliced brain. It did not look like what I thought it was going to look like. It's just like really, if you ever see one, it was like the slice, it was the medulla, and it looks like a forest. I thought it was going to look like cauliflower, and it has a cauliflower-like look, but it looks like a forest. So there are these different layers, and this is really important to understand. So we have what's called the neocortex as the outer layer. Okay, this is where where we associate with like learning, education, and civilization, and consciousness, and that kind of thing. When you're thinking some stuff and you know what you're thinking, even if you can't say it in words, okay, that's usually it's the neocortex that's doing something. That's the new brain. Okay, that's sort of exceptional for us as human beings. But down below, we have this like little limbic system here. Well, it's not so little. It's called the monkey brain, but I call it the cat dog brain. Because any of you have a pet monkey? No, like we don't know about how monkeys behave really, but we know how cats and dogs behave. And anything that your cat or dog does that you would also do, okay, or maybe like when you're a little kid, like that's what the limbic system is involved in. So how many of you have dogs? Dogs? No dogs? Okay, a few of you. What happens when you leave your dog alone at home for the weekend? Does your...
No idea. It makes a mess.
He makes a mess, he makes a mess, usually. Yes. And why is that? Why does your dog make a mess? What emotion is he or she experiencing?
Stress, anxiety, boredom.
Anxiety, stress, need for revenge. Yes. So all of those emotions come from this lovely old brain, which is weird because it's responsible for all of our primal emotions, and all of our memories are stored there too. And so it's this really important place that gets solidified really early in life, and then we're not really conscious of what goes on there. So it's some kind of like, there's got to be a creator, right? Because there's so many cruel jokes about how the brain is organized. Some fun jokes too, some fun ones too. The cerebellum, just make sure you keep breathing and you stand up and you remember like how to ride a bicycle and play piano tunes and that kind of thing. It's sort of like long-term stuff. And there are different regions and they're all connected in networks. And to manage all of this, your brain has this part up here, right here. Okay, on the left and on the right, behind your forehead. And if your brain were a company, it would have two CEOs. Goal-focused CEO, okay, and open-ended sensation-seeking CEO. And they both got their benefits, their stuff. This one, if you lost this one, like you and everyone, well, you wouldn't notice, but everyone else would. This one, if you lost it, you're gonna notice, but other people won't necessarily notice. You'll just be a more conservative version of you. And I don't mean politically, I'm just like, you're like, no, I don't need to invest. I don't need to learn anything. I don't need to be open. I don't need so they fight all the time with each other. So, and then they have to regulate all the rest of the brain. And so when we talk about like what kind of experiences somebody has, say, with ayahuasca, and it opens up something, what is it opening up? A lot of times it seems like there's stuff that's there in the brain that's like right outside the awareness of our chief executives. They're like, oh, you don't need to pay attention to that piece of information or that memory or whatever it is over there, because that's like unproductive. And sort of those chief executives push it out of the way. And then what happens with something like ayahuasca or meditation, holotropic breath work, is that those boundaries get loosened. You know, the executives are sent on vacation, and then you get to find out what's going on with the company for real. And that's just, you know, when the cat's away, the mice will play. You got a lot of mice. We all have a lot of mice. So it's really, just the way the brain is organized, we're set up to have a lot of drama inside the brain and a lot of dynamics and a lot of opportunities for discovery. Now I've been doing EEG since 2006. EEG is like electroencephalogram. It measures the electrical activity on the surface of your brain. And people have been using this technology for over half a century. It's like pretty well established. I don't like do neuroscience in the sense of like opening people's brains or surgery or anything like that. I'm not a medical doctor. I don't diagnose or treat disease. But I do send subjects to a protocol of like an hour's worth of like everything. Like math problems and listening to music and using their cell phone. If they're a cigarette smoker, maybe they get to smoke. Maybe they just get to see the cigarette pack and then I tease them and they don't get to smoke. That evokes some interesting things, by the way. It makes you appreciate how hard it is to get over addiction. and just like a whole bunch of stuff. They go into virtual dating. Any of you use Tinder? Okay, well, you don't have to raise your hand. So they do that, and I've done for people of all ages and backgrounds internationally. And like I was in Britain this time last year, and I had 20 subjects come in, and I bet that British people had more abstract use of language skills than Americans do. Because British people love poetry, and they're very snappy and snarky, like really quickly, and just like, and they have like a love of storytelling that's a little bit different than Americans. And it's true, actually, it's two cultures divided by a common language, because their brains were definitely statistically organized differently than Americans. So it is just always, everything is like always a learning experience all the time. So I couldn't help but wonder, what happens in the brain when? People go on a short trip, when they go on a long trip. And fortunately, I have friends who are willing to be subjects for these things. And we'll see what happens. So yeah, I use this EEG technology. They're gonna we won't wear a medical cap, but I normally do use the medical grade technology, and they do a bunch of these different activities, drawing and calculating and so on. And one of the things I want to know is that this is like a bird's eye view of the brain. Like what are the different functions that the brain helps us with? Now, of course, you need different parts to do pretty much anything, but if each part like had something that it did more of than anything else, like here and here, like the parts by your ears, those parts actually help you hear. And they help you hum and play music, and they also help with impulse control. Weirdly, the brain is organized in the weirdest ways, and I think this is important to know too. For example, this part right here, if you're right-handed, okay, this part right here is going to help you process word content. Like right now I'm speaking and you hear each word one after the next. This part also helps you with managing sexual impulses. Why would it be that way? But think about it. So what happens when you're, like, imagine go back to when you're a teenager, or you're in college, and you're at a party and you meet someone attractive. What happens to your speaking skills? Do they go up? Do they go down? Okay, so they're competing, okay, for resources and attention from that same brain area. So a little bit more attractive, and you're like, oh yeah, like all of a sudden you have something to say. Like you want to talk to the person you find attractive. But if they're too attractive, then your brain is spending so much time managing your impulses that you don't know what to say. So the whole brain is organized that way. It's crazy. Okay, it makes sense from an evolutionary point of view, but that I think is also what makes sometimes when people have an experience, whatever it is, whichever of the medicines it is, that it's so odd how it works sometimes. I believe, and I haven't gotten far enough yet to say it, but I believe that just as we have an ego, and the role of the ego is to like keep us focused on the outer world and goal-oriented and like get things done and be on the ball and stuff like that, be certain about things, be definitive, that there's another part of us that's like, I don't want to say anti-ego, but is like an inner healer or inner helper, and somehow that gets activated. And the inner helper healer has an awareness of storytelling. And I'm not sure how that all works yet, but I'm very curious. If any of you happen to have any ideas, let me know. I'm very curious. Now, something important to know is that the brain works in networks, and sometimes you can have the whole brain synchronize all at once. Okay, that's for folks who are left-handed or in like the creative arts or very intuitive or something like that. They may have this pattern where all the brain regions fire simultaneously. Young people and like kids have that more often too, and then they get older and like their brain gets more solidified and they have definite networks like this. And then they're less creative. So this is something we see structurally in the brain that changes over time. And some people maintain a pliable brain. I do believe what happens, because the various medicines tend to reactivate this kind of whole brain activity, that it can take us back to a space which is a little bit more childlike in the use of imagination, but also in the use of sensitivity. Like kids are very sensitive in a way. Like something perturbs them and they cry or they laugh or whatever it is. They're not these hard adults, you know, with an armor. And this, though, is the normal state of affairs. That there are these networks of 5, 2, 3, 7 regions, whatever, that work together in sync, and they're like teams. You all love teaming and organizations. Like that's the best thing in the world, right? Teams to get things done so someone else can make money. I didn't say that. So that's sort of like the someone else is the executives. So there are these networks in the brain, and I want to study those too. Like, how do the networks change? Like, how we use different networks when we're under the influence in these altered states, even meditating, what happens? The last thing I want to mention is that you've probably heard of things, even if you don't know what they mean, like alpha waves, theta waves, delta waves, stuff like that. Okay. The way I like to explain it is your brain is sort of like a radio, and that there's a whole bunch of radio stations. And delta waves, they're all there at once, and you can tune into one that's like out louder and more active than the others. Delta waves are like the easy listening station. In fact, I can just break it down here. You can see it. It's the same thing. Here's the delta, relaxed, receptive, in the flow, sleeping. This is like the easy listening music. Then we have theta, which is like detached, routine ways of thinking, problem solving, things you already know how to do, habits that you just repeat without thinking about it. If someone, say, takes ayahuasca and they look like they're sleeping or something like that, we expect, okay, if they're really sleeping, they're going to be showing a lot of delta waves. I tell you they don't. Now, we'd also hope if these experiences are habit breaking, that they cut through the stuff that's habitual, that these also would be very low. That this would be, I don't know, this is the kind of music, it's like pop music that you don't really want to listen to. It's like catchy halfway through the first time you hear it. And then after that, it just sort of disappears into the background. But for some reason, like underneath it all, it's still programming you a little bit. You know, so it's there. This is supposed to be yellow. It's yellow on my screen. This is alpha wave. So this is when your body connected. So when you go and you do yoga, for example, and you really like after, I don't know about your experience. My experience is that I hate starting yoga. I'm like, it's like, I'm going to be stretching. I don't like to stretch. That's why I hated Taekwondo, too much stretching. And then you just like, but eventually you get into it, and by the time, at least for me, and then when I'm done after the hour, I'm like, oh, I feel so good. And this is the part that allows you to connect with your body. Now, sometimes it could be bad though, because a smoker sees a pack of cigarettes, they're also going to show this. The whole body's like, oh, nicotine. I'm going to feel so much better. Okay, so there's, we think it's like a great thing to feel connected to your body, but it might not be. I mean, sometimes people separate from their bodies, they disassociate when they think of a bad experience or something like that because they don't want to feel it. But that's a lot of the medicines, that's what they do. They really connect us to our bodies. Okay, so like San Pedro, for example, really activates awareness of the peripheral nervous system. Like every little thing, the environment, every little thing around us, it takes on this like heightened awareness. We have this heightened experience of it. This is supposed to be orange, and that's the reward-driven or feel anxious. This is like America, okay? There's three modes for this: busy, striving, and stressed. Okay, and it sort of goes in that order. So it starts off, you're busy, and there's like, ooh, reward. And then after a time, like the reward's not going so well, and then you become stressed because you fear you might lose something. So I really want to see this go down. Okay, when a person is, whether they're meditating, whatever it is, in an altered state, to get the most out of it. It's like, let's lower this. We don't need competitive corporate America right now, please. Thank you. Come again. And then gamma. Gamma's nice, okay? Because gamma. Actually, you know what? We'll activate gamma anytime is porn. Okay, I think that's why people like porn. But besides that, I didn't do a definitive test on that, by the way. I can't say that for sure. But when people have insights, when they're very highly stimulated, when I did brain imaging at Burning Man, okay, all of the subjects started here. They're so hyper-stimulated. If you've been to Burning Man or seen videos of Burning Man or something, you have some sense of like it's over the top. It's Disneyland for adults, or it's heaven's slum, as someone described it. And there's this amazing space, and this activates when people have an aha moment. Like in psychology, they've structured experiments, and people have this aha moment. And they tend to, statistically, after a certain amount of time, most people will be like, oh, that's how you solve the problem, and then this activates. So I would really want to see this during any kind of experience with altered state or with medicine or whatever. People have satori, you know, it's like this moment of like, aha! Okay, then we could have this. Like what would be really great is if we had like these two together. Oh, by the way, if you wonder where watching TV is, it's over there at the far left. It's just nothing. That's not the whole brain, it's just the neocortex. But when you watch TV by yourself, that's what it tends to look like. So this is the currency that I'm coming with, and this is like 90% of what was good to know about the brain. I realize I'm discriminating against the people on the left-hand side of the room. And the metaphor I like to use is the concert. The brain is like an orchestra that usually plays our favorite songs. Might be playing other people's songs. And the deceiving thing about this is we have two conductors who might have completely different songs in mind. So as we get older, hopefully we work that out. And then I love, like if you look carefully, like he's asleep. I don't know where he's looking off to. She's very anxious over here. This guy, this one here, you see his nose right there? Like he's got the flute up his nose. And there's no question about it, it's in his nose. And it's just like that's how we feel about our brains sometimes. And that's just in everyday life, not to mention an altered state. So it seems like maybe we can play different songs when we're in this altered state. That it's not just the tunes that we tend to repeat, the patterns we tend to repeat, that it's new ones. Maybe ones we've forgotten, maybe brand new ones that we'd never even imagined before. And before we get into a case study, are there any questions?
What do you predict our brain waves are, just like listening and watching and trying to learn from a presentation?
Well, that's a good question. Usually just listening and looking by itself is not very much to stimulate the brain because we've all had several decades of practice looking and hearing. So that won't be so stimulated. What would stimulate your brain is if you have questions about trying to relate the material to your own life or something like that. And that's, and I think that's the challenge, usually in any kind of lecture scenario. You want to connect with the audience. Connect means you activate their brain in some way. And that's, so that's what we would hope. But yeah, the thing is we would expect like, oh, it's visual, but the visual region won't really be stimulated because it's too simple. And it's just like, it's a projection screen. You know, only if you were an alien would you be wondering like, what is this? And the question back here.
So you said ideally you're trying to achieve both the gamma and was it beta?
Gamma and alpha. That's my hypothesis. That was my hypothesis, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was thinking that sounds sort of ideal, like body connection. It sort of sounds like what happens to a lot of people in these various plant medicines and on Sapo. And then, but they're also having insights at the same time, and it just seemed like that was like the starting hypothesis and seemed like a good thing. Like I don't want them to be asleep. Yeah, what if we, oh my God, what if we found out everyone was just asleep there? That would be so disappointing. Yeah, but we know, I mean, they couldn't be that. It couldn't. So this is a case study with 5-MeO DMT. It could be called 5, it could be called Sapo. I know it's a little confusing because if you go and read some books by some American authors, they're going to refer to Sapo as actually combo. But they mean different words in Spanish. And there's like some books I think are just mistitled. Like they don't know that Sapo means toad and rather than frog. But however you know it, this is what this is. So it's in the DMT family. And this is the, it's made from the glands of the Sonoran desert toad. And then it's burnt and the smoke, you take up the smoke and it's quick. You know, within, you count to 10 and already, whoop, there you are. And it could last for like 5 minutes, 20 minutes, maybe the entire experience would be 40 minutes, something like that, you pop back up and you're like ready to do whatever you're gonna do. And so I managed to look at somebody, we will call him patient R, 1 person change in brain activity. And I'm focusing on 1 person because I want you to appreciate like the detail that goes on so I could draw the conclusions that I did. And having looked at similar things and of course comparing it to research studies that are out there, I got the same kind of results. So no surprise. So he's a 39-year-old Brazilian male. He got a standard dose of naturally harvested 5-MeO DMT. He was eyes closed, he was reclined, all of these typical things. He wasn't out like thrashing around in water or something like that. It was very relaxed. He was selected because he tends to remain like completely motionless through the experience. So he's very tame. He had done 4 ayahuasca sessions over 18 months prior to this, plus another 5 MEO-DMT experience a month prior. So I'm not getting somebody who's brand new to psychedelics, and I think that's important to know. We will see an example later of somebody who is brand new to it, to DMT and what happens with that. He had done meditation and yoga before, even had his chakras removed. It's true, no, he did. He went to something where they remove your chakras. He followed the diet guidelines, he came with an intention, all of those usual things. And I use EEG technology, a medical grade 1, monitored his activity for 50 minutes, from like just a couple minutes before to like all the way through, and I compared it against 2 other sessions that I had done with him, because he loves to volunteer for these things, 3 years prior and 15 minutes prior. Now the 3 years prior was before he had ever done any kind of psychedelic at all. So I could compare his brain, how it had changed over 3 years. And the difference between age 36 and age 39 should not be that drastic. It's not like the difference between, say, 13 and 16 years old, or 17 and 20, or something like that. And then I compared them against the results of several medical doctors who have published this area or made their results known to me. And I did get results that were very much like theirs, which was really cool to see, because repeatability is, you know, like a scientific touchstone. So this is every day, and this is the altered state. Well, what is this? So here's like a list of things that he did, like tasks. It's not important to know, he just did like a ton of different things. And this is just the amount of activity. Okay, like voltage is literally what it is. Okay, your brain is electrical device, chemical to electrical. And then this is him in the 5-MeO-DMT over the course of the 50 minutes. There's a little bit more at the beginning, okay, and there's more at the end. But he was reclined all of this time, so he was pretty relaxed. Whereas here he was not reclined, like he was up and he was doing things and doing activities and talking and so on. And it was very, very low. I mean, you can see it's running down through here. My finger makes an interesting pointer. This is an interesting experience. What do you think happened right here? This is the first time that he coughed and he spoke. And then he went back in again and went quite low, but it wasn't quite as low as before. And then here again, there's a little bit, and then at this point here, he just opened his eyes and he was back. The experience was completely done. So just alone, this little thing said, okay, the behavior I'm seeing on the outside has some correlation to what's going on in his brain. And of course, because the amount of activity, this is low, I expect it to be, because he's reclined and relaxed and so on. This is like the volume on the radio. It's just volume. The volume is turned down. A lot of interesting stuff could be happening, is just turned down. So I'm like, let's go deeper. These are pie charts, and this is the everyday version, and again, the altered version. The everyday version and the altered version, they definitely look different. Okay, now one thing that's interesting to know about everyday is you see that blue slice there, the big blue slice? Those are delta waves, which normally show up when you're sleeping. Yeah, like 40 to 60% of people's brain activity, their brain is actually asleep while they're awake.
What's the percentage?
It depends on how you measure it, but it's like 40 to 60%. That could be different parts of your brain are asleep while you're doing something, just because, I mean, you could appear very wide awake, but there are some parts you're just not using. So like, it's like a house. If you owned like a 20-room mansion, you can have the lights on all the time. I bet you know somebody who's like that. But there are also people who only have 3 lights on at any one time, or 1, okay? And so people have, like, a lot of the lights are turned off. And some of the other ones are turned on and use sort of typical proportions you see there. It depends on what kind of device you're using and how you measure it. What's important, though, is that they're different. And this yellow slice here was huge. Huge. So what is this yellow? This is that gut feel alpha that says you're connected to your body. And that's, I don't see exactly what, well, it says right here. So normally it's about 10%. 10% for him, is like, that's within a normal range for a person. And then here, it's like almost 60% of his brain activity. It's a different region. So imagine like 60% of the rooms in your house have on your favorite music as you walk from room to room. The music that makes you dancing, and you're having fun, and you love it. And then this sleeping part, it's there, but it's really shrunk. And then this green, what's that? That's that theta. That's like that routine, like habitual, thoughtless kind of thing. There's a little bit, but it's so small. It's the smallest one. No wonder people can have some kind of transformation on 5-MeO-DMT, because a part of your brain that's the habitual way of thinking about things is like almost turned off. And then this insights piece, like that's pretty big. Normally it could be as high as 5% for some people. I've had a couple students like that. Stephen, you know our friend Alex. Alex is like 5%, because Alex's brain is just always on. I mean, he's like the Oxford graduate student that is good. He's like in a learning mode. But Renato has like 1%. This guy here, and so, but here's 9%. So it's huge. It's like nine times more. So already I'm saying like, this is really cool. This is how I was hoping and sort of thinking it was going to be. There's definitely a really nice change. And it tells me a lot, because again, that's saying there's this body connection. That means that information is going on in our nervous system, in the stomach, in, where like tons of neurotransmitters are made, and distributed the vagal nerve system, your heart, your lungs, your limbic system, that cat-dog brain. That information is coming up and is becoming accessible to you, the conscious part of you, the neocortex. And at the same time, you're also having insights. So maybe the information comes up and then your brain is like, okay, now let's weave this all together and make meaning out of it. Or it could be that you're like, oh wait, there's this insight. And because you're connected with your body, that information is written downwards into your body. And that's one of the things that people say. Like, as an example, I understand this, I don't know from experience, but I understand this is the case, that like ayahuasca is very physical compared to, say, LSD. That ayahuasca has this, like, you come out of the experience, you're like, wow, that really, like, you feel it in your bones. LSD is like, well, that was an interesting trip. Like, that was like, my head went off somewhere. But the rest of me, like, where was that? And I don't know, but this is what I've been told. So that's sort of the difference between cognitive and like you have that insight and you feel it in your bones afterward. And just that confirmation that sort of that's what's going on. It's like, that's so exciting. It's, we're not wasting our time. And of course then the question becomes, as we'll see in the next case study, how do we do something every day like meditation that can actually take us into that space? And then this was the last thing. It was like, how often were the people in these particular states? And there's like this little strip at the top, like how often were they in the blue and the green and the yellow and so on different wavelengths. And you can see like here, every day there's like a lot of ups and downs and some like stressed kind of stuff that ends up in the orange range. So like he's like, he goes between challenged and stress. He's in like that corporate America work mode. And then there's this here, and so ooh, what? Wait, this is like, it's like he got a haircut right here. What happened with that? So that's like right at the boundary of like stressed. It literally is at the boundary of stressed and insight. Now, if you've ever done ayahuasca, that probably rings a bell, doesn't it? Between stressed and insight, and like right walks the boundary right there. And then for 5-MeO-DMT, a lot less is remembered. So I don't know, even though they're part of the same family. So that would be, I mean, oftentimes people say they don't remember exactly what happened. But there is a walking that line again between stressed and insight. And then this body connected space, this little narrow range for a lot of things in this body connection. So this is just a different view as the previous, the pie charts, but it's sort of understanding what is happening when. And to me this is really important because the insights aren't just happening at the beginning. You might wonder, like, oh, when? Okay, so somebody uses sapo, and they're like completely unconscious for 15 minutes, and then they like wake a little bit, and they maybe talk for a moment, and then they sort of sink back into it. When are the insights happening? All the time. Okay, so when the person doesn't remember anything right at the beginning, the insights are happening. When the person has come out of it briefly, like here and here, and notice they did come out, there's like this little bend here. They went down, there wasn't that body connection, and then he went back into it. And then the insights continue afterward. So it's like, yeah, it's like the moment you come out of it, don't just like rouse the person to get up, like let them stay with it. Because all those insights are going to keep happening. So I think from like a therapeutic point of view, it's really important to know this, that the quality of what's going on, we don't know exactly, but certainly the quantity, the brain activity is still like completely in this mode. And then there was this moment where he's like, okay, I'm done. And it even proceeds a little bit, and it's like, it drops down, and it's like, yeah, he's out of it. And we know he's out of it. Questions? Yes?
What is there, and I imagine there probably isn't, any dangers of being in that state permanently?
I would say, there's an interesting thing. Are there dangers in this state? I've seen a number of people come in who are right at the border here. I did a couple once in San Diego, and they had just arrived from the UK the night before, and they were severely jet lagged. Very successful, a couple busy, a lot of things to do, and really jet lagged. And they showed a lot of this. Not the body connected part, but this insight and stress part. And like, yeah, they're stressed from being jet lagged, and they're like on their toes and like ready to do stuff. So I don't know how often you really want to be there. You want to be mindful of your health and your body and all of that. The other time I saw it was when a couple came in, and the couple, they fought so much. Oh, they fought so much. And they came in hoping that the brain imaging would like reveal, like she was hoping, she's like, tell him we have different brains. She's like, we are, right? And I'm like, yeah, you probably do from what I know about you. And it's just like, and they did some of the brain imaging while they were together in the room, and then some I'm like, go away and let your partner just be here. And like she was so much more relaxed when he wasn't there. And then, but it was actually, that was really, but otherwise, like both of them were like this. Because they're trying to figure, like they were there for a reason, like they haven't given up on each other yet, so they're there like trying to figure out something and learn from the experience, but they're also really stressed. So I'd say if you really want to have the insights part, you want to be more like up here. You're away from the stress. Or, you don't need to go there so often, maybe. A good question, yeah. Yes?
Back in the 60s, they used to have those week-long LSD parties. Mm-hmm. You're familiar with that?
Well, I was conceived during the summer of love. That's the only thing I know about that.
That explains everything.
Yes. No, I don't. No.
Well, the idea was what happens if you remain under the influence of, let's say, LSD for a week. In other words, after 8 hours, then you take another hit. Mm-hmm. And you just continue with that 24 hours for 7 days.
I suspect from what we're going to see about the brain wiring in a moment, the different brain networks and pathways, especially the way LSD supposedly works, and like it really just takes those neural pathways and like shakes them in a box and breaks them up, that it would do a really good job of breaking those traditional ways of thinking. Right. Which might not be useful for success if you're like a banker or something like that in the everyday world, but will definitely break some habits that you have. That's what I would suspect and what we're going to see in a moment. And I have looked at some folks too who are like, I looked at one person who's been training as a shaman, and that's really interesting to see because his normal, like everyday brain looks a lot like his ayahuasca brain. So you probably could do that, but being a shaman doesn't prepare you well necessarily for certain other activities in life. So you're sort of, it's a trade-off. I know this is really complicated, but what's important to know about this is every day, and this is altered state of the same gentleman. And these are brain networks. So the lines are just indicating regions that are connected together. Like you'd see in some kind of like social network or something. In fact, you can think of it that way. Like these are all members of the social network, and if you see red lines, those are the social network folks that work together. They're good friends. And the thing that stands out for me is that in this everyday version, he doesn't have this whole brain state where all of them are connected. But in this altered state, you see like the starburst pattern. That's like a stylized way of showing all the regions working simultaneously. So he's in a state of insight that's also a little bit stressed. He's very connected to his body, and all of the regions are working together simultaneously. Very different than his everyday self. So I'm like, nice. Okay, there's definitely this capacity then for we know is more childlike, is common in people, as I said, who do like the creative arts or very intuitive, who have high openness as a personality trait. And then to see that this is the kind of experience people give. So I suspect, I mean, there are trips you can do in the Amazon, especially, I know somebody who did a trip to down in the Amazon on one of those, we'd say like tourist trips, but this was before people knew about that, so this was the early 90s. And they just did 9 ayahuasca ceremonies in 9 days, each at a different location. So I suspect that probably, like you described with that LSD party, had a long-term impact. And he seems particularly ill-suited to everyday life.
Since then, or just?
Well, probably, but you know, he was in the military before that and a lawyer, and not anymore. So he hasn't lost those skills, but
so it worked.
So it worked, yes. Well, he was in the military first, and it wasn't even, it was the Israeli military, which is like even a step up from, I don't know, maybe they have fun there, but, and then became not just any lawyer, but a British lawyer with a wig. So there's like a whole, so I don't know, maybe it was him. I can't say, but yeah, there's definitely changes in brain wiring that go on.
So the starburst pattern.
Yes.
Does that have something to do at the center of it with the hypothalamus or pituitary?
No, it doesn't. It's just a stylized representation. Yes. That is a very good question, though, because if we were to look further down into the brain at the same point, yes, the pituitary and so on would be there. And in fact, all of this that runs along through here, this was actually done with an older machine that I have. The newer machine does have sensors here. But there is this fissure in the brain, and that fissure goes down to what's called the cingulate cortex, which is responsible for some really important things. Like, if you hear a sound of a voice, is that your voice or somebody else's? And I think that's important to know, because when people have an experience in ayahuasca or 5-MeO-DMT, they're generally not confused about, you know, they see an entity or something and they understand they're not being abducted by aliens at that moment for real. Like, they're having an inner experience. So I would be really curious to see like how it impacts. And I think that they see too, like with ayahuasca, if a person has a tendency towards mental illness like schizophrenia, which shows up in the cingulate cortex, like you don't want to do ayahuasca. So I don't know how that would work with when we skirt that line of like mental illness and so on. But yeah, this is just stylized representation. Yeah. Great, yes?
A couple of questions. And maybe you've already said this, I got here a little late, but does this pretty much equally apply to, let's say, mushrooms, ayahuasca, 5-MeO, you know, LSD? Is it reasonably comparable? And the other question is related to, does this also kind of apply for microdosing on any of those?
Right. So what I can say is I started, this was my first experiment, and I compared it to other people who had published in this area and got same results. This was 5-MeO-DMT. And then I did experiments with DMT, which would be ayahuasca. And we'll see, we got fairly similar results. I won't go into as much detail about this. I'm going to show you something that's more relevant to the demo we're going to do. I do understand that like mushrooms and LSD each have their own different ways of doing things because they're a different class of chemicals. So but I would suspect like at least ayahuasca and sapo would work roughly the same way in the brain, just because they're chemically quite similar. So they're tryptamines in the same family and so on. So that's but yeah, you want to go and compare and see how they're different. And just to say, I was just going to say, like, you see the starburst pattern, and then very briefly, there's other people, this is other people's research, not mine, and they also show like before, during 5-MeO-DMT and recovery, and they show this like starburst or almost starburst pattern as well. So that was just one example where I'm like, yes, I got the same results. And it was just exciting to see that. And so what are the lessons that I learned? Well, very rapid onset with 5-MeO-DMT coincides with very large drop in the magnitude of the brain activity. In other words, the volume goes way down on the radio. No surprise. But underneath it all, we're seeing stuff that's going on very important in the brain. There are spikes in the magnitude, and those correspond to the person coming out of the experience. But just because they come out doesn't mean they can't go back in. We know that they do, and they go back in at the same depth almost as they did beforehand. The person may even be unconscious, and yet there still is really crucial brain activity going on. So this idea when somebody says, if you go to ayahuasca ceremony and they say, like, even if you fall asleep or you don't experience anything directly, the medicine is still working on you unconsciously. And you're like, I don't know. Is it? Is it not? It is. Okay, at least for 5-MeO-DMT. And I believe after looking at DMT, that's the case as well. So even if you fall asleep during the experience, it's still working on you. Or you don't remember it, whatever it is. Frequencies associated with everyday routine tasks are highly suppressed. In other words, automatic habit-based activity is suppressed. During the time when you're in it, if you have habitual activity, say it's like negative self-talk or addiction or to OCD, something like that, that will be suppressed during the experience. So maybe you do want to go for a 1-week experience then and just like have it suppressed a lot. Body connection, insight is happening. And it could be two-directional. I mean, it's you have insights and then you feel them. You feel the impact as if they were real experiences that happened to you. Or something comes up and you're like, God, that was a horrible experience and I've been storing that in my stomach for how many years? And then you have an insight and it's integrated with the rest of your brain. Very, very nice to see. And then, you know, there's these other few little sort of technical things here, as I described, like how it's two-directional. I just sort of said that. And then there's this brain wiring. We see like this whole brain state that's going on. All the regions are working simultaneously across the whole brain. And it does take us sort of back to a kid-like state. The other thing which I didn't talk about, but happens too, is that these executive regions get really dampened down. Like normally they have a strong impact. They're like linked to other parts of your brain sort of all over. Especially if you're the more extroverted kind of person. Extroverts tend to have a lot of sort of dense neural wiring in the front of their brains. In other words, the executives in the brain and we'll say the middle managers of your brain like work really closely with each other. If you're the kind of person who's a lot more like introverted, then it's usually you have more dense wiring in the back of your brain. So you're like a little bit more predisposed in the beginning to the ayahuasca experience maybe. And it can be very visual and so on. You sort of know that. There's some extra little details. And that's 5-MeO-DMT. And I felt as a takeaway, it was important to know, give the people 40 or 50 minutes. Let them have their full experience. I mean, that was just a takeaway. The idea of having an intention so that they have something to integrate around seems like a nice idea. Something's going on even if they don't remember it. Sometimes people, we know someone who offers somatic therapy, for example, like body work is part of it. Body work seems like a really great idea because the person is connected with their body. Yes?
One of the previous images had a diagram that said, a couple of the 3 images said before, during, and recovery. And how do you define recovery?
Well, that was...
time, or?
No, I don't remember the details of this. This is the study here. And acute EEG studies of the acute effects of the visionary tryptamine DMT from 2015. I don't remember like how long the recovery later it was. It could be like easily just the 15 minutes afterwards, something like that. And usually, especially with 5-MeO-DMT, when people really come out of it, they're like, oh, and I'm out. Yeah, so it could be as simple as that, or it could be an hour or even a day later. I honestly don't remember.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes?
I find that the video there with 5-MeO, there's a moment where you're like, oh, I'm back, but you're still feeling it in your body. And did you see what the kind of difference in your brain that might be happening between those two different states where you're still feeling it in your body, but your consciousness is back here again?
I think as long as the person does not move, and they minimize speaking, that they can remain in that space. So when we saw, back with our subject here, we'll take a look at this. Okay, this is 50 minutes. DMT does not last, 5-MeO-DMT does not last 50 minutes. I mean, unless they're like way overdosed on it. But it went, so from this point onwards, he coughed a little bit, he spoke, he would, like if something had happened or someone gives him an instruction, like he's alert enough during this time, he knows what's going on around him. And he's lying there and so on. He didn't fall out of the experience until he actually started actively talking and like sat up and so on. So I would say one of the things is like, Like a shaman might encourage you to be quiet and try and not talk about or intellectualize your experience right away. And I would say from what I've seen, yes, allow the person to just bathe in the experience, even if they're like, quote, awake and they know what's going on, they can answer a few questions, that's all fine. If they're just doing a tiny bit of talking, that's not going to take them out of the experience. But especially if they start moving, they get up, something like that, it's not completely gone. Notice that there's still spikes here, you know, at this level, and there's still some spikes up here. They're just not nearly as dense as over in here. But this is not quite like his usual self. And so I would say afterwards, it's just like the longer you minimize it, the more effect you're going to have minimizing talking and so on. Yeah. Yeah, great question. Okay. Does anybody need a break? Or we're going to do one more thing and then we'll do the demo.
Did you measure exactly how long it took the ramp up? I mean, I know it's just a number of seconds, but
Yes, yes I did. So we'll go back to this slide here. This, actually what does it say exactly here? Right, so this word at the top says start and this says inhale. And this is 50 minutes, so this is going to be about a 1 minute space between when it started and inhaled. Here's when he inhaled because he like sat up a little bit and there's a little bit of exertion. And then you can see for about 2 minutes here, there is a period where the brain activity is a little bit higher. And you can see this sort of little cluster of spikes here. And then, boop, by about, what does it say, 100 and,
72.
yeah, thank you, yeah. 172 seconds, so this is about 3 minutes in. He's like, and he's into it. Yeah, so it does indeed work very quickly. Yeah.
You said you compared it to, you know, like a couple other people that have done a similar EEG with a 5, but have you compared it to just like other EEGs that you do when people are like meditating or playing games, or I mean, it's completely different, or?
Oh, I mean, certainly for meditation, and we're going to talk about that, because there are individuals like the gal who could do Kundalini in Seattle, like she could get into the same state that took this guy here 5-MeO-DMT to get into. Yeah, she showed the same pattern. And that's something really, really interesting with meditation, is to say there's sort of 5 levels of meditation in terms of what we see in the brain in terms of depth. And that's, so I've been very, very curious to see that. Now, if a person has no meditation experience and they're not sort of probably naturally inclined to it, they're like, and I think I'm meditating, and I'm thinking about my car keys, and literally their brain is not any better. I'm like, you just may as well open your eyes and continue doing what you're doing. It's just useless. And we're going to see that in the next case study. The next step up, which you can learn, or you know, you can go and do like a DMT once or twice, and you will like be bumped up to level 1 meditation immediately, long term. And we're going to see why that is. But beyond, yeah, it's funny, that whole spectrum. But if you could get up like to what I say is like level 5, then that's the same as if you did the 5-MeO-DMT. It might not last as long, but it will be there. Yes?
You're saying that by using 5-MeO, that moving forward after that date, you automatically graduated to that next level for the rest of your life, or for a short period of time, or what are you?
Well, only for, yeah, red pill, blue pill. What I can say is I did, for him, I couldn't use him as an example because he already had yoga and meditation experience. He had his chakras removed, like there's all these things. And so what I did, so I'm going to answer your question sort of with this DMT experiment I did with 3 people, which looked more long-term. Like one of them came back just recently after 2 months to see how was he with his meditation, and could he do that. So that's, that is a big question of mine, and that's what we're going to sort of talk about in the like 3 or 4 slides here. Yeah. And then, yes?
I was going to say, would that apply to other psychedelics besides 5-MeO as well?
I think to like regular, just like straight DMT, ayahuasca, that it applies to that as well. The others, I don't know. I mean, you talk to somebody else about, you know, their research on that. Yeah. Now, I'm going to introduce you to a little bit of different interface, because this is a different EEG machine that I use, and it's the one we're going to use tonight. And this has 4 views. But the meaning of the views is pretty much the same. So this is delta, and it only shows up when you're sleeping, or equivalent. That's like the easy listening channel over here. And then this is theta for routine problem solving, alpha for limbic and body connection, and then beta and gamma, it sort of squishes them together for insight, excitement, and learning. And then the color is actually the amount of activity. So like in this region of the brain here, there's the nose. I want you to consider, by the way, just all of you for a moment, to understand how tricky your brain is, that your brain is your built-in trickster. That human beings, we have this big field of view, right? Okay, like 120-degree field of view and up and down and all of that. You have a big honking nose in the middle of that field of view. Even if you have a small nose, it's a big nose in the field of view. Why is it that you don't see your nose all the time? I mean, it's like right there. It's like sitting right in the middle of your field of view. It's because your brain edits out your nose and like edits in what it thinks is going. I mean, that's why we move all the time. You fill in what's going on there. So that's how tricky your brain can be. The other neat thing I found, which has nothing to do with psychedelics directly, is like you ask people, okay, I'm going to ask you a question, and it's going to be a weird question, but I want you to pretend as if it's real and give me an answer. Why did you choose to wear a pink sweater tonight?
Because that's the color that aliens enjoy the most.
Aha, okay. So right there, of course, she gave an answer to something about a non-real thing. And it could be quite convincing. You know, if I asked you, why did you decide to wear a blue sweater tonight?
Because I liked it.
Because you liked it. Yeah, maybe you're just in a mood for blue, something like that. Many times when you ask people why they did something, or why something is the case to justify their reasoning, most of the brain remains completely quiet. It's just the executives up here. It's like you ask a company, like, why did this happen? And the CEO is like, because, and it gives an answer, and it's a completely made up answer. And your brain does that like 90% of the time. It just makes up answers. And then it really hopes that the answer is going to work. And it's scary, but we see this in the brain. Now, a lot of times people, of course, we've been exposed to the same things over and over again. So it's the CEO speaking from experience. But the brain is also a really great bullshitter. And that's something to keep in mind, that that's part of what the ego does, is the ego bullshits a lot. Pardon my French. So it's really nice that we have these medicines we can use that at least quiet the bullshit. We quiet the ego. So this interface is a little bit different. It divides up these different brain waves, or sort of radio stations, into these 4 views. And the more red or orange or yellow is indicating the more activity in that part, or sort of overall. We can see for this person here, like he has a lot of activity in this one region, which is right up here. This region is involved in focusing, especially if it involves like hand-eye coordination and focusing of attention. And it's for something very routine. This is about routine problem solving. It's not really active much anywhere else. So that's basically what his brain is doing. Question about what you're seeing here. Yes?
Could I just comment on that?
Yeah, the bullshit
of the brain, the bullshit. I think that's why religions have been so effective, going back thousands of years, where you could tell somebody some nonsense and then they just accept it. And then you can control and do all sorts of other nasty things.
So what am I going to argue that with you and say, no, the aliens didn't suggest that? Am I going to say, no, you didn't really feel that way? What could I say? And it sounds like a very thoughtful answer, doesn't it? I mean, people have reasons for things. It's tough. I think especially in you know, we see this like, if we're disconnected from the consequences of our decisions, it's the same thing, that we don't even get the feedback to correct our brain so that we learn differently. Yeah. Now, this is a pre and post meditation EEG. And I want to say, by the way, pictures of people here, they've given their permission to appear. So this is pre-DMT, and I'm not going to say a lot except to say, here's the computer with the view, and she has lots and lots of theta, so like routine problem solving. In that moment, she's got a lot of routine problem solving, and you can see she has like a little worksheet in front of her too. And then this is also pre-DMT, and this is just where I asked her to meditate, and she does have experience meditating. She's not like super meditator, but she has experience. I would say this is like level 3 at a level 5, where she's just able to like quiet her whole brain. It's like all of the views are pretty dark, and if there's even a tiny bit of green, it's in like the sleep mode that's there. That's pretty good. Now she did we did a follow-up that was 2 hours after she had done 2 15-minute DMT sessions that were back to back. So she did 1 DMT session, then there was like 15 minutes, and she did another DMT session that lasted like 15 minutes, and then she waited 2 hours, and then we did a follow-up where she came in again, she did some thing with the worksheet, and she meditated again. And this was her meditating in this view, and she had almost entirely this alpha activity. It was very, very active, this very strong body connection. Now she didn't have a lot of this beta gamma, especially the gamma insight part. But she did have a tremendous amount of body connection that was a step up in terms of her meditation skill, because not every meditative technique has this as a goal, but a lot of them encourage body connectedness. And if you look at like the deep meditation techniques, Buddhist ones, Hindu ones, that they're going to encourage you, you want to feel your heart center, feel your body, feel connected with that. And so she had very, very strong connection there. And that gave me, and it's suppressing that routine problem solving. In fact, the only thing that was active in the routine problem solving a little bit was the region of the brain for focusing, and the region of the brain over here that's your CEO, that's the open-ended CEO that likes to do new stuff. So that is not, so it's okay to have that CEO on board, okay, if you're going to have one. So I'm like, okay, this is like pretty promising. Like she did 2 DMT sessions, and like she definitely stepped up in terms of her like meditative practice. She was really able to feel her body unlike before. But of course, we're curious, what happened during the DMT sessions? Well, this is sort of like 1, 2, 3, 4. I took some photos very discreetly, and I'm just like sitting right there. So she starts off and she shows a lot of theta and alpha activity, so routine problem solving and body connection. And then we go on and she has routine problem solving and body connection, and also the sort of insight and learning mode. So each of these like views has something going on with them. And then here, she only has this alpha body connection. That's the only one that's active, that body connection, and it's in the visual regions of the brain. So whatever she's looking at, maybe they're like crystalline patterns, and feels the patterns, and she's very connected with that. And then about 3/4, actually more than that, about 80% of the way through the process, it just turns to this: black, 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 solid red. Maximum body connection. The machine doesn't read any more than that. All the routine problem solving quiet, certainly not asleep. A tiny bit of, actually there's a tiny bit of activity, you can't quite see it, but there is here a little bit for insight. But in this case, they call DMT, and this is the kind that's smoked. It's not like ayahuasca where you go on a 6-hour trip. This is a 15-minute trip. Okay, and in the 15-minute trip, at least she got body connected. I did not see a point though where she had both the body connection and the insight mode. And that might be why people come back later and they report they don't remember much from their DMT experience like a week later or something like that. It doesn't make the same kind of impact. It could be because of that. But she's only one subject. Fortunately, I had 2 other subjects. So this is, now these, one of the gals, she did not get back to us about permission, so I can't show her face. But this was before and after, and the during was the same as we saw with the previous person. Now the before, she already started off, she considers herself like, not an expert, like, but a good meditator. And she's easily able to get into a mode where her brain is like completely quiet, just like that, okay? And then in the after, also very quiet except for one region, which is very, very active. This region is back here. And this region is involved in like visual pattern matching, remembering the narrative of your life, and several things that are involved with patterns and seeing the future and processing your narrative. So I thought that was interesting. She had like a little bit of a different experience. And I thought, well, thank goodness I have a third person. So he came in, and I don't show his before because his before was just like him, like a regular old person doing stuff. He had no prior meditation experience. He said, oh yeah, I try and meditate every so often, which probably means like once a year. And he closes his eyes and he's sitting there and it's like, I'm like, nothing's happening, dude. It's like you've got full-on brain activity. And then he went through the experience of the DMT, and again, he had very similar as the gal at the beginning. He comes out, and at the other end, at last, except for one region, which is the same as her, he's able to quiet his brain. It's the first time I saw his brain quiet, and I had him as a subject before, and then just like a week ago. This is the first time he was able to do a successful meditation, and he was like, now I know what it feels like. He says, now I can practice because I know like what to get to. And he has been practicing meditation. He said he's been practicing meditation since then. He came in, actually it was about 2 weeks ago, he came in, we did another one, and he was right away, and was able to quiet his brain. And he said, what was, no, maybe if he had just continued doing meditation, he would have done that anyway. But I think it was knowing, oh, this is what it feels like. It created this anchor, this reference point. So I would say, yeah, that's probably what DMT is good for, is like a before and after, and helping a person have a reference point for what is it like to be in a slightly altered state, more relaxed state at the very least. And that was the comparison. And DMT is the same as in ayahuasca, but I would love to see the ayahuasca experience, but it's not that I can't get volunteers. The thing is that, and some people will be fairly still, especially if they're practiced with ayahuasca, although if they're quite practiced, then I'm not sure we'll see as much change. But ayahuasca is a very personal experience. And imagine you have to go through some kind of very personal experience and you're wearing like a headset the whole time. And actually after about an hour it starts to feel tight unless you have a small head. And so just for me, I feel like as a researcher, I don't want to intrude on people's personal experiences. Like my curiosity is not so important that I'm willing to do that yet. Maybe someone will come along and say, no, I'm perfectly cool, I'd really like to know. But until that time comes, I felt DMT is a lot easier. It's only 15 minutes, and it is the same substance, albeit, what as they say, it's like a businessman's trip. You fly in and you fly out. So I felt as somebody who does some things around helping people with mindfulness and skill building and so on, that this was really, really useful to know. That it puts people in more of an open state, the ability to like go to a different place in their mind, and to learn meditation. Mindfulness is very useful. By the way, did you know that LAPD has not one but 2 different mindfulness programs going on now that involve like deep meditation and stuff like that. And it's for the policemen or policewomen. And because I was going to work with somebody that I know there, and he's like, oh, we'll get you in. And it's like they probably have never done this before. And then we found out they have 2 different studies going on right now. And whole programs. And they're using this with prisoners in Los Angeles too. People who join these programs and they're learning meditative techniques and they're doing brain imaging with them to help gauge like the effectiveness of those. So even in the most sort of wayward places, the kind of stuff is going on.
So the sense of the meditative mind only came in at the end of the experience?
Yeah, that's very interesting that that body connectedness state, like the path that what can I say? DMT took a path that has like beginning, middle, and end. And that the brain was different at different times. Whereas with the 5-MeO DMT, it's the same kind of experience for the brain all the way through. And I believe that people have that experience with ayahuasca. They feel like there's a ramp-up process or ramp down. That you sort of get into it, that there's a narrative this, and then something turns like to a different chapter and you explore something else. And then there's like a coming out period that happens afterward as you're exiting the experience. That it does have more of a here, 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 and here over the course of, this was just one of her 2 sessions, that her brain changed quite a bit. But she did make it to this point, although not to the point that I saw with 5-MeO DMT. And 5-MeO DMT is considered like a launch into space compared to DMT. Like it's definitely like a level up in terms of intensity. And I think we see that in the brain as well. Yeah. Not to say anything less about DMT. I think the ayahuasca experience is something you more work with regularly. I mean, you know, Santo Daime suggests like what, once every 2 weeks, a small amount or something like that. And that's, so I can see where that would come in.
So it's like the alpha waves in like this cortex is like body connectedness. Does that mean that the body's nervous system is perhaps more active, or I guess my question is like, does EEG really tell us anything about like what's happening in the limbic system or in the spine? You know what I mean? Like, right. Does it is it okay? The neocortex is turned way down and it's connecting with the body, or is it like the body is turned so far up or something that the neocortex is just like, all right, too much?
No, it's neither of those. So what happens is the neocortex is actually, they're good hypotheses though. The neocortex is actually 6 different layers, like neural layers. And once you get to the bottom neural layer, then you're going to go down to like the upper part of the limbic system. There are neural pathways that go from the limbic system up, up those 6 stories to the top of the neocortex. And the idea with alpha waves is that when you don't have alpha waves, let's say it that way, that as the information is coming up from the limbic system and it's going to like start to go through like those 6 stories, there's like a gateman that's like, no. I mean, you can retrieve information in a factual way. Like what is a memory that you have, and retrieve the factual information, but it's a disassociated state. So that any affective component, emotional component that's coming up from the limbic system, once it reaches those layers of the neocortex, the bottom layer, it's like, or like not exactly the bottom, I think it's the 2nd or 3rd layer, it's like, no, you're not coming in. Whereas when people show a lot of alpha, what happens is basically the gateway is open. And it's not just the factual information from memory or phobias or bonds with your parents or whatever that come up. It's like all the affective part of it too, the excitement of it, the emotional impact of it. And we see this, if you have a phobia to something, and a person, there's a point which they're going to go from being objective about it, like just seeing a picture of the creature maybe, to actually having an emotional reaction with it. And some of that is the systems from the limbic system get really strong and they eventually overwhelm the CEOs and the neocortex with this reaction that's happening. The same when people say there's like sexual trauma, then a person when they remember it might have a disassociated experience. They remember it but they don't feel anything. Or they may have a very associated experience where anytime they remember it or something comes up that suggests an association, it's like they're having the experience all over again. They feel it, and I think that's where we get in like ketamine treatment is an example where it helps. Like maybe ketamine dampens down some of those things. Like that would be a different mechanism than what happens here, but in this case, yeah, I think it is important, and it's very interesting that the limbic system and the nervous system in general could have some very negative information stored there, and yet why is it that when people go on these ayahuasca journeys that they can get negative information, but it will never be so much that it overwhelms them? It always seems like you get the amount that you can handle. How that works, I have no clue. I mean, there is nothing in the EEG is just not the kind of equipment, or I just don't know how that would work. But I do think that's really, really fascinating, because it's not just like let the floodgates open and whatever comes in, because then that could be very negative. And sometimes an ayahuasca journey can be incredibly difficult. And yet the person comes out of it and they're like, oh, I feel so much better. And so maybe negative does come up, and it's just like the negative just doesn't, the person doesn't respond to it in the same way. I don't know what the mechanisms are. But it's very, very interesting. But in terms of what alpha means and what that's associated with, it really is that gatekeeping that happens in those layers of the neocortex. So it's each one of these is a frequency band, so it's showing 4 frequency bands, and then the amount of red indicates like the magnitude or the amount of activity, which is different than the previous display, because every damn EEG device has different displays, and they've got their own way of doing things. Yes.
We have 30 minutes left.
Okay, so now is the time to do the demo, isn't it? Yeah. I've asked one person to volunteer because he has very little hair. Are you still up for it?
Oh, you asked me?
Yeah.
I don't remember that.
Don't you? That was during one of your ayahuasca journeys, wasn't it?
Did I say yes?
No, it doesn't matter. Who would like this? Someone who has short hair who would like to volunteer.
I will volunteer.
You will volunteer. Okay. Okay, we'll let Stephen go. Okay. All right, wait a minute. Come on up. I don't have the music to go with it though with the game. So it's a platform. Yeah. Okay. Now is the time you can use the restroom or something too, because it will take a couple minutes. Literally like no more than 5 minutes, but we're going to get this contraption set up on him. And I'm not going to try and make it perfectly calibrated. Whatever we get is what we get. And so yeah, come back in 2 or 3 minutes. Otherwise, talk amongst yourselves, meditate on meditation. Yeah. We have our volunteer here, Stephen. And again, just as a quick recap, what are we seeing? On this view here, we are seeing the routine problem-solving kind of activity, habitual problem-solving kind of stuff. Here is body connection, and then this over here is insight and excitement. So if we show you some porn, Stephen, then maybe we're going to see some... See, look how quickly you learned.
I love it.
You learn so quickly, don't you? It's like magic.
His body is excited.
Yeah, body connection, excitement. Yeah.
Oh my
God. Yeah. Okay, so we're all quick learners with this, yes.
Have you ever used this in sort of a biofeedback way, so you can visually see certain reactions of your brain and try to recreate them?
I don't do biofeedback as like a professional thing, but certainly when I'm with friends or people specifically, well, the service I offer is sort of intensive EEG to do skills and personality assessment. Now, as part of that, they have a 1-hour protocol of things that they do, but the last thing is pretty much anything that they say they want to do. So a person comes in as a guitarist, they're going to say, like, can I play guitar? Or, I'm a meditator, can I do like Kundalini? And so with that, yes, I do entertain that a fair amount. And quite often people ask, like, I'd like to engage in some kind of feedback process, see how it's going. But mostly I run into that when I'm working with a therapist or coach. So I've done that in a number of places in the US and in Europe where I go in and it's usually a 3-person thing. So you would have client, therapist, and then me. And I'm sitting here with the computer sort of over in the corner and I have like hand signals to give to the therapist to indicate what's going on. Well, the most exciting one was in Czech Republic and the whole therapy session was in Czech. So I have no idea what's going on. But it was beautiful because we have this portable device and they were using NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, as one of their go-to skills or in their toolbox, go-to methods. And so they had him standing up and moving and doing anchoring and that kind of stuff, and it really afforded a lot of feedback. And one of the interesting things we discovered, for example, is the visualization didn't work for him unless he was moving in the visualization. So that was a really nice feedback. The other one was, unless he was told the purpose of a communication, that he didn't really listen very actively, to say the least. But after on, they switched places, because this was just, he wasn't actually a patient, he was a junior coach, and then the senior coach, it was his turn. Turns out the senior coach didn't listen well either. Unless you gave a frame or purpose to it. And then so we would play with it and try and discover, when does the listening go on? When does that happen? The same with the couple who came in who were fighting all the time. And I discovered that she would drop a lot in anxiety and to sort of defensive reaction when he would ask her questions that were basically like, what would you like to do? Or how do you feel? Instead of talking at her. And we would think that's common sense, right? But to have that pointed out to the person, like after 5 times doing this, I'm like, dude, the machine doesn't lie. And and Americans love technology because if anything's going to be right, it's the computer. So that's slightly facetious. But sadly, not so much. So they really, that was like a learning point for them. And they are still together as a couple. Somehow they seem to have worked it out. Yeah.
Do you ever just strap it on and like look at it yourself and do stuff?
I do, yeah, to like a little bit improve my meditation technique or something, but it's hard to look at myself, so I usually record it as and then I go back and do it. The problem is that for me to get in a meditative state these days is not so easy because I'm so busy, like every single day. Like I have this thing tonight, then I have something due I'm doing like a project with Airbnb, like an AI project in the morning tomorrow, and then in the afternoon I'm going downtown to do brain imaging of Deepak Chopra. So Yeah, and then I have one day off on Saturday, except it's not really a day off because I have to work to prepare for a meeting on Sunday with some other people. So it's really hard for me to like, I need to like go for a weekend. Who offered that week of like something or other, right?
LSD.
LSD, yeah, maybe that's what I need for, yeah. So look, we're gonna do some meditative practice here. We're gonna start off with that. We know what happens when you think about porn in an audience in front of you. That's good. Okay, so if you need to wait, this, and by the way, this isn't just me flippantly saying this, is actually somebody they did some research on this and published it. If you want to pick me up in the afternoon, like you're at work and you're tired and like even the coffee isn't doing anything, they say, look at porn for a few minutes, it'll totally wake your brain up. Not too long, of course, but that might get you off track or something. But it just may be reinforcing the wrong things in the limbic system. It has its own downsides, but just a little FYI. So what I'd like to do is a meditative activity with you. And just sort of as much as you can feel relaxed, allowing your legs to see that you're nicely firmly on the ground there. And sort of go through and close your eyes, feel the weight in your feet, and your legs, and your arms. Focus on the heaviness in your breathing, the sensations throughout your body, your stomach and your chest. Just sort of focus on slowing your breathing. Beautiful, you can come back to us. And overall, how was the meditation for you?
It's more difficult in front of a crowd. I think towards the end, like 30 seconds, I was starting to drop into it.
I'm sorry.
Towards the last like 30 seconds, I felt like I was dropping into it.
Okay. Yeah, and I did wonder, oh, should we continue, or what are some things we saw on the screen here?
What you said, so like connection to body works.
Yeah, the connection to body over here. There was one section over here, so this is the left hemisphere visual region. So you might have something that maybe you visualize sometimes to help you focus or get into the mode. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's what I'm like. There's like a routine way of doing something that's like a visual focus to help make that happen. Even when this wasn't fully body connected, and there are times when it wasn't, there was often the right hemisphere was. Of course, the right hemisphere of your brain, you probably heard of like left brain, right brain. It's not like people use both sides of their brain, but there are differences between the hemispheres, and the right side is a lot less verbal and more visual, spatial, and so on. More holistic, as opposed to analytical. That's sort of the neuroscience term of the day now. And so even when it wasn't the whole brain, that we saw this side, if there was an area that tended not to turn red so much to really get the body connection, it was in the auditory region here that would be involved in processing word content and self-talk a little bit, and managing sexual impulses, and pain impulses too. And so that was not as much. This region, by the way, here is involved with understanding emotions in a social context. So he's sitting in front of an audience right now. So just understanding that the region usually gets active when people are in a group, at least people who have decent group skills. So tell us a little bit about how were you, say, a year and a half ago in terms of meditation?
I don't think I was meditating at all.
Okay.
A year and a half ago, no.
Okay, so tell us a little bit what, how often do you meditate now?
Probably 2 or 3 times a week.
Okay.
For between 10 and 30 minutes each time.
Fantastic. And did you experience an altered state recently besides the meditation?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
I did.
Yeah, so that was that. When was that?
That was last weekend.
That's last weekend. Okay. And do you find that were you able to tap into some of that experience again this time?
A little bit, yeah. I keep going back to it, and the calmer moments are definitely when I do. Like the last 30 seconds there was, I was starting to get more into it.
Yeah. And we can see even just is that there's sort of really engaged and thinking about it.
Right.
Yeah. So if any of you were in education, by the way, this is also a promising thing when you see the person fully engaged like that. It's a nice thing to see too. How did you, what is it that prompted you, or how can I say this? What is it that allowed you to have this habit of being able to meditate 2 or 3 times a week?
It was the realization of the impact that it was having on me. Like initially I just started doing it out of habit because people said that it was something that's good for you. And then over time I started noticing it changed my behavior. I was becoming more, I want to say critical, but really aware of the way that I was thinking. That just gave me so many incredible insights into the way that I think that affect my mood. Like I notice when anger takes over, I notice when sadness takes over, I notice when I'm getting swept into things, or if I desire to, allowing myself to be swept into things. Just making those kinds of realizations, like how I sort of architecting the way that I experience the moment.
And what are some things that you focus on or pay attention to while you're doing the meditation like you did here? Like was there something visual, auditory, like a mantra?
This time and usually I just focus on my breath.
Just focus on your breath.
Sometimes I'll also do guided meditations that just a whole bunch of different things.
Okay, okay, fantastic. Do we have anyone here who does, who leads guided meditations or assists with that kind of thing? Sometimes that happens, like I was working with a group of psychologists in San Diego in, actually it was at the end of January, and it was really great. 2 of them came up and like demoed what they do as therapists or coaches. Yeah, would you like to work with him a little bit? I know this is very impromptu. Okay. Yeah, you can take your chair with you if you like, or stand, as you prefer. Okay, and it's yours.
All right, go ahead and take a deep breath. Close your eyes. Breathe in, breathe out. Let go of everything. The day, the week, the month. And just focus on your breath. And feel the top of your head relax. Feel your face relax. Let your neck relax. Let your shoulders relax. Find yourself sinking deeper and deeper into the chair as your chest relaxes, as your hips relax, as your thighs relax, as your shins and calves relax, as your feet relax. And just breathe in and breathe out. And breathe in deeply and breathe out. And allow yourself to be somewhere safe, somewhere very familiar, somewhere you can relax and be yourself. Connect to who you really are. Just take in a deep breath, feeling this all around you. Enjoying this place. And you find something here, something that reminds you, something from your past. What is it? What does it remind you of? If it's a good experience, remember the positive feelings. And if it's not, allow yourself to release it. Feel yourself in a safe space. And breathe in deeply. And breathe out. Find yourself connecting to an energy or an emotion that you'd like to invite more of into your life. And imagine yourself surrounded by that. Perhaps it's a color or just a feeling, but allow it to fill your body right now, all the way. Filling yourself with that emotion, that feeling. Anything associated with it. Bringing it into your body, bringing it into your mind, feeling it from the top of your head to the tips of your toes. Imagine taking that forward into your life. Imagine walking out of here today, feeling that energy every moment. Achieving the things you want to achieve, experiencing the things you want to experience. Imagine interacting with the people you'd like to interact with. Really feel it in your body, in every pore of your being. And imagine yourself walking in the world, feeling this, experiencing it. And find something in the space that you're at that reminds you of this. It can be anything. It can be anything in the space. But hold it near you, keep it in your mind's eye. So when you come back, you'll carry this with you. Really infuse all of this emotion, this sensation into this object.
taking a deep breath, as big as you can. And breathe out fully, breathing everything out. And one more time. Taking a deep breath, remembering this feeling, and breathe out. And one more time, breathe in deeply, and breathe out. And whenever you're ready, open your eyes.
Everyone feeling relaxed, you know? What was nice to see was there were times when you would fall out of the space, but when you were there, it was really very solid. It was nice to see. And probably as the second go-round, you got to relax a little bit more.
Definitely.
Overall, how was your experience?
It was delightful.
Excellent. Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Thank you.
So what is your name?
My name is Danny.
Danny? Okay, Danny offers guided meditations. And they're delightful. Excellent. And is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience before we wrap up about your experience with the altered states or with meditation, anything like that? Now that we've had this intimate view of you.
I don't know, I feel so calm now. No, I don't have anything else.
Okay, excellent. Yes?
Could we do a 20-second experiment?
I think so, yeah, we could do 20 seconds.
Yes, we have
great.
20 seconds.
So the experiment is if you put a finger on each eyeball and you start to push inwards, so you notice the light come on or the visual.
I see what.
Then you release your fingers.
Yeah.
Powerful.
So it's nice, it does a good job of calming the brain overall, which is really valuable to be able to do that. And I'm reminded in Kundalini, one of the things you do is you put your tongue, turn it so that it's hitting against the top of your mouth, and then you bear down, as if you're like jumping into a swimming pool or something. It looks sort of funny, but that bearing down process, it's sort of like the same when you pop your ears on the airplane, and then you bear down. That can have that, like, it really gets you into your body, because you can't really think of anything while you're doing that. Like, at the very least, it's going to get you out of your head. So yeah, there's a lot of really nice small techniques that people can use to like stop anxiety, stop like repetitive thoughts, those kinds of things. And that's seems like you're having some kind of thought there.
No,
we didn't say anything.
I was doing that.
Oh, okay, yeah. And how was that?
I don't know. I don't remember anything of it.
He doesn't remember anything of it. That means it worked. You don't remember anything. Yeah, excellent. Okay. Let's see. I think the important things to say, there are a couple of other slides, but that doesn't really matter. I think we've gotten the fun part of it. One of the beautiful things to notice, first of all, we know that your relaxation technique, like, it definitely does something to the brain. Yeah, it's very nice to see. That several people have come to me asking. The psychologist, she developed her own method, and after 25 years, she's like, I'd like to know whether or not it actually works. She says, I mean, she's like, I know it does, but like, what exactly is it working because of the reason I think it's working? And the answer was yes, it worked. And we discovered through her 6 clients that she really has 2 different kinds of clients categorically, and that she needs to start them in her process in different places. And so that was a nice insight that we got while working with the brain imaging. That to anchor like new resources into a person, if the person already arrives very associated to their old resources, you need to pull them out of their old resource anchoring. Because some people have a lot of alpha activity, Okay, that doesn't mean that they're in a blissful state all the time. That can mean that their body is locked, like with smoking, like they're addicted to all of their behaviors because it's locked into their body. So in some ways, those individuals can be more difficult in working with them. It's more of a challenge to pull them out of their old behaviors because you have to get them out of their body before you get them back into it from a therapeutic point of view. But fortunately, you know, that often works in tandem with the routine kind of thinking, and something like ayahuasca or sapo is just going to break all of the routine thinking. You had a question?
Yeah, regarding that being locked into your body with smoking or something, how does this speak to working with trauma, stuff that's stored in your body from when you were a little kid, you know, that's hard to get out, shall we say?
What I've seen with this is a lot of people disassociate, so they don't, and there's actually a thing that I use, one of the tasks that people do when they go through the protocol I use is something that's been developed, it's like a value sort, but really it's like negative and positive stimuli, and what we want to see is that people become disassociated with negative stimuli, and that they become associated with the positive ones. So in other words, you feel good about the things that you like, and you step away from the things that you don't like. And a lot of people behave that way. That's their response. I did meet somebody who was diagnosed with anxiety, depression, and ADD. And he didn't want any medicative treatment, and he came in just as like a friend, and he's like, I'd like some feedback about how my brain is doing. And the thing that really stood out is he had a reversed response. So when he would be exposed to negative stimuli, he would become very associated, and then he'd become like anxious and feel bad about it. And then when he was exposed to stuff that he would normally like or profess cognitively that he liked, he didn't show any like alpha-associated response. Imagine going through life not feeling the things that you sort of know you like, but don't feel it, and then you feel everything you don't like. I'm like, yeah, I don't know how to fix that.
Along those lines, there's you know, psychological or philosophical idea that you want to become comfortable with all your emotions, whether they're negative or positive, as a way to sort of, you know, have a more equal, equanimous approach. So when you say dissociate, is that like not literally not dealing with the negative, or is the idea of being comfortable and feeling the negative but not having a charge, let's say, with it?
I mean just in this sense that the person doesn't have like the strong body sensations coming up that would like influence their thinking about it. Like maybe somebody had a very horrible experience with dogs when they were a child, and they can approach a dog and interact with the dog. They don't like doing it cognitively, but they don't actually have an emotional reaction. Right, okay. Whereas other person who's more, and this is what I mean by associated, is they're going to have that reaction. They're like, no, I can't go near them, like I'm too frightened. Yeah, that kind of thing. Yes?
Regarding Husserl's 20-second experiment of pressing on the eyes, we all saw what was up there when that was happening and what happened immediately when he released, but how would you interpret that?
I would say overall it had a strong calming effect, and I don't know, was there something going through your mind as you pressed your eyeballs?
I was focusing on trying to see what the patterns were. I saw a lot of like checkerboard, spirals, sort of yellow and black patterns.
What was interesting about that was there was no activation of the visual cortex.
Yeah.
Yeah. They all seem to go black, as I recall, and then except for one area, one of the images on the right, I forget which one, that on the right side of the head there was a red flash.
Up here or down here?
I think it was down below, but there was one.
So this region here is involved in pattern recognition. But like I said, people really overestimate how often the visual cortex will activate because we're very visual creatures and we've already seen everything under the sun pretty much. Like it really needs to be something taxing, or like a situation where you like need to interpret somebody's body language in a dating scenario. Like where there has to be something on the line, essentially, for us we need to be challenged for the visual cortex to activate. That, and for a lot of people, imagination doesn't actually, the sort of internal visualization, third eye, activates actually the left frontal, sort of frontolateral region here, not the visual cortex. Because this is where short-term memory, like working memory is handled, and we have a sort of virtual stage of the mind's eye. And so that, I was thinking maybe that would be activated and it wasn't. I'm thinking that you're trying to focus on the patterns and see what patterns were there was too cognitive to be in your body for that. So we didn't see any kind of extra body association, but it was useful in just like turning off thinking as a whole. And you were sort of relaxed from before too. So there's a lot of things certainly we could explore. I don't want to keep us any more than we are, but before we go, I wanted to mention two things. Our hostesses here can tell us what is the right thing to do, how to do this. If you're interested, I do have these lovely booklets, and they're beautiful in color and laminated. They don't cover everything we talked about today, but they do show quite a number of things related to like coaching, how the brain works, like many of the ideas that we saw. They're 50% off, so they're $10. If you've got $10, then you can do that. And I just wanted to say too, that there is the manuscript over by your chair. You can go get it, yeah. That's a great thing, is that the device travels. Yeah, remain pretty calm. Okay, this is my next book that I'm almost done with. I have like 4 pages left to edit, and Jung on yoga. Yeah, so as I mentioned, Carl Jung talked about and did yoga in 1932. And it's chakra work for all types of people. And it's not just like that. There's a lot of books on chakras, but as far as I can tell, there are no books that talk about Carl Jung's take on chakras. So if you like Jungian psychology, archetypes, that kind of thing, if you work with entheogens and you're wondering what's going on with my experiences, the convincer for me is when I read his descriptions of the higher chakras, especially the crown chakra, Sahasrara. I'm like, that dude did something like Toad, because there is no question. I mean, the language, I just got to tell you, his language is like really suspiciously familiar. And I know it's from Kundalini, and that's where it came from, but just as a little quote.
Do you take pre-orders?
So that's what I was going to say. I have a sign-up sheet for pre-orders, and one of his things that he said was, so some of this is me, and then I'll tell you where the quote is. Psychologically speaking, Jung explains that the person who was but a seed in the first chakra is now, quote, in the first chakra, is, quote, now in the full blazing white light, fully conscious. In other words, and this is still him talking, the God that has been dormant in Muladhara is the first chakra, is here fully awake, the only reality. And he talks about this higher dimension where you're you and you're not you. And it's the center of the unio mystica, so this space is like the mystical space with God. With the power of God, meaning the absolute reality where one is nothing but psychic reality, yet confronted with the psychic reality that one is not. And that is God. God is the eternal psychical object. There is nothing but that. And if you've taken 5-MeO-DMT and you hear about the eternal and infinite white light, you know exactly, and there's more to it than that. And I'm like, yeah, he had some special experiences. I don't know how, clearly not appropriate in Victorians, post-Victorian society. But yes, if you do want pre-orders for that, I have a sign-up sheet and Jung on yoga. And I also do personal neuroprofiling sessions, and I was really inspired by this to offer a one-day Jungian yoga workshop. It's not like Hatha yoga, I don't teach yoga, but it's like a workshop that's around this kind of material. And I offer workshops a lot of times, but just like this has really inspired me. So here's the sign-up sheet here, and the rest of it. Thank you. What's that?
We can put it at the back and so people can sign it up.
Oh, that would be fantastic. Would you? Yes. And otherwise, I'm afraid our time is at an end, unless you want to see me again. And it's been so much fun for me. See, neuroscience can be fun and easily understood. When I said porn, you all understood immediately what was going on. Okay? Yeah. Neuroscience can be fun and easy. Don't be intimidated by the brain stuff at all. And in particular, there is somebody that I work with to be able to do like before, during, and after with DMT and that kind of thing. So for individuals who want to go and go on a journey a little bit and to the right spot and see what happens with that, that's also something that's every so often. And if you know Bryce Draper, I'm sure he would be happy. But
we're going to have Bryce Draper as a speaker May 10th at the Aware Project.
Oh, fantastic. His work with Combo The frog poison, which I should mention is completely legal and trainable and all of that. He really, I gotta speak for Bryce, like he is so upped his game in the last year. It's really, so I'd be very, very excited talking about meridians and the use of meridians with the frog poison and all of that is just, yeah, I've had Kundalini reactivation with frog poison, which should normally, like never had that before. So really, really cool sorbus, yeah. So yeah, so you absolutely come out and hear Bryce. And Bryce is awesome dude, very affable. Thank you so much.